Hello there, manic.mercurian here with your birth chart reading. This reading will be for Wednesday, April 18th, 1990 at 2:14 a.m. in Hoover, Alabama. I think you're my first Alabama reading, so that's kind of fun. So this means you have Sun in Aries, Moon in Capricorn with Aquarius rising. And you did mention in your emails that that you're well, you actually asked me if you're technically Aries Sun or not. You definitely do have Aries Sun. I know that the cusp dates can sometimes vary, give or take a day. You were born pretty close to the Taurus cusp. However, you can see in this chart here, Sun is at the bottom of the chart. It's definitely at 28 degrees Aries. So really all day, you're born very early on the 18th. That entire day, any of those babies born on that day would still be Aries Sun, children, people, whatever. However, that is kind of a nice cheat for me it's kind of a nice launch pad for this reading. Because you were saying that you're probably Aries Sun, but you don't relate to that very much. And looking at your chart, I'm really not surprised at all that you are saying that. And I really have at least two or three reasons why I could see why you wouldn't relate to Aries Sun. First of all, let's talk about Aries Sun. Sun is exalted in Aries. This is typically a very strong sun sign. As you probably know, Aries people are described as being very outgoing, very confident. They're very fiery, okay? Of course, not every single person with Sun in Aries is going to 100% relate to those archetypes, like you may not. But that's generally what we expect from Aries. Now, the reasons why you may not be this like super fiery, outgoing individual, there's a couple reasons. So I'm trying to think of what direction to go with this. Really breaking your chart into like multiple parts, I would say that there's a lot of earth in your chart. You may relate to earth signs actually more than fire signs. And I'm actually going to go a different direction. I'm sorry. I'm going to come back to that. But first, the first thing I did notice that I mentioned to you in the emails is that you don't have any other fire placements at all. There's Leo descendant, but there's no planets at all in fire signs other than the sun, if you want to call the sun a planet. This is pretty rare. Most people have Mercury in the same sign as their sun sign. So in other words, most people with Aries Sun are going to have Aries Mercury as well. Plus, usually I would expect like maybe one or two kind of random other planets in fire signs. So it's pretty unusual. You actually have a lack of fire in your chart. So in other words, Sun is in Aries. You probably do relate to Aries on some kind of level. Like maybe you're very individualistic, or maybe you have some kind of charisma about you. That's something I'm going to come back to later. However, there's nothing else backing that up, though. There's no other fiery placements. If you had some other placements in Sagittarius, Leo, or Aries, they would reinforce these fiery themes of being outgoing, being spontaneous, being impulsive, being very charismatic and confident, outgoing, extroverted. Any of these other fire placements would back that up, and then you might feel a little bit more like an Aries. But just having Aries Sun with nothing else in the fire signs, that's my number one kind of reason that I saw right off the bat why you wouldn't relate to Aries. So if you don't relate to Aries, then what would you relate to? And that leads me to my next point. So you really have a lot more going on in the earth signs. Yes, you do have Aquarius rising. We'll talk about that later. Venus is in Pisces. We'll talk about that as well. But a couple really big or really important placements, Moon and Mercury, are both in earth signs. So really, I could see you relating more to that whole theme or archetype more than fire or more than Aries. So Moon is in Capricorn, Mercury in Taurus. Both of these placements would indicate that you don't like to rush into the things at all. That's very different than how most Aries people would be. So rather than like rushing into things and being very excitable and like super engaged and like jumping into new situations, your Moon in Capricorn and Mercury in Taurus suggests that you'd probably prefer to hold back. You may be a lot more laid back, more easygoing. You want to conserve your energy. You like to approach things slowly and gradually. And actually, one of your biggest strengths is probably that you're very consistent. You're very like even keel. That's what these placements would suggest. So again, this is all completely different than Aries. Like, for example, if you had Moon and Mercury in Aries rather than these kind of heavy Earth signs, then again, you'd be a lot more like flashy, in your face, super spontaneous and charismatic. You may have some kind of charm about you, but it's in a more like earthy type of way. Earth signs are heavy. They, like I said, they approach things gradually, and they're very practical as well. So that's another difference. Rather than just like jumping into whatever's the most exciting or whatever's the flashiest, you probably are a lot more concerned about what's the long term. Like, where am I going here? You probably have excellent foresight, because what you care about has to do with the long term. You don't really care about getting results right away from any particular situation. You really want to know that the road you're on is the best in the long run, if that makes sense. Moon in Capricorn and Mercury in Taurus. Again, really, these placements have a lot in common in this regard. They're both consistent, practical, focused on the long term. This is more of how I would describe you in general. So if you wanted to do some research on your own after this, just research the sign of Capricorn itself or the sign of Taurus itself. And you might relate to those signs a lot more. Or for instance, you're asking if you're Aries or Taurus. Even though you do have Sun in Aries, this may be part of the reason why you might relate more to Taurus. It's because, for one, you have Mercury in Taurus, but also you have Moon in Capricorn, which is similar. And then I can give you another reason why you wouldn't relate to Aries. So your Mercury, first of all, I use equal houses, so your chart may appear a little bit differently here than you may have seen your chart elsewhere. Most people use Placidus or whole sign. But anyway, so with this house system that I use, you have Mercury in the 4th house and Moon in the 12th house. You could say that these are both water houses because they do have some parallels. 4th house has parallels to Cancer, which is water, and then 12th house does have some parallels to Pisces, which is water. But basically what I'm getting at is Moon in 12th house with Mercury in 4th house. Together, this would indicate that you probably are a homebody. You're probably very like chill, easygoing. You may be often misunderstood as well because you kind of keep to yourself. You may not be very expressive, especially in environments that you are new to. You really feel, at least this is all speculation. I try to be careful of how I phrase things in these readings. But these placements suggest that you really feel much more familiar, much more comfortable in environments that are familiar to you. Or also, you'd feel a lot more comfortable with people that are familiar to you as well. So you can kind of think, it's almost like I don't know if I'd go this far, but it's almost like you think a little bit like a Cancer, or you feel a little bit like a Pisces. A little bit. That's a bit of a stretch, but it's because of your 12th house Moon and your 4th house Mercury. What else? You'd be drawn toward familiar environments. You might be a homebody, kind of reclusive. Again, this is all very different from what we'd expect from Aries. But let's get deeper though. With Moon in the 12th house, this is actually a really deep placement. I can get a lot of information just by looking at 12th house Moon, because I guess it's something I'm familiar with. This indicates a lot of different things. So how do I start here? So part of what it indicates is that you, like I said, you keep to yourself. You're a bit reclusive. You're probably much better at understanding other people than they are at understanding you, because you're very observant and you're very empathetic. You can really feel what other people are feeling, and you can observe a lot. You're probably, an old soul, as they say. You see a lot, you feel a lot. You're probably very sensitive. But very private as well. With Moon in 12th house, as well as Capricorn at the same time, that would indicate that you're extremely private. You very much keep to yourself. And again, it's about as different from Aries as you could get. We would expect you to be super outgoing and maybe oversharing, because you're in Aries. But again, you have to look at the Moon sign and the house and the sign that the Moon is in. Because you have 12th house Moon, whatever is in the 12th house is suppressed, especially at a young age. So, Moon represents the core personality, the core identity, as well as our emotions. So the fact that you have Moon in 12th house in your natal chart indicates that at a young age, for whatever reason, you felt that you had to completely suppress not only your emotions, your feelings, your intuition, but also, your entire core personality. You felt like you couldn't really have your own identity deep down. And like I said, that could be for a number of reasons. Like, I've heard all different kinds of stories. Maybe you were bullied, maybe you had a lot of siblings that were loud and you were kind of left out. Maybe you had some kind of traumatic experience where, I've heard someone who said they had a traumatic experience where they were mute for a while. Anything like that. But whatever it is, it could be a range of things, but it's something very deep, very heavy, and it involves you feeling like you weren't allowed to have feelings. You may have felt like you didn't have feelings at a young age. You may have been kind of just numb, and not felt like you didn't really have feelings. So this is a really difficult placement for sure. But there is kind of a silver lining here. So it basically forces you to be kind of a late bloomer, as they say, because you start out life like the 12th house is the land of the subconscious. It's not really conscious. It's behind the corner from the ascendant. The ascendant is who you are and kind of what you're seeing, if that makes sense, within your chart. And 12th house is like just behind the corner, so the ascendant can't see it. So basically, all your feelings and your core personality is kind of locked away from you. It's not accessible to yourself at a young age because of those reasons that I kind of just delineated. But over time, it takes time, basically. This is also true whenever you have detriment placement, and Moon is in detriment in Capricorn, in addition to being in the 12th house. So in other words, like it probably has taken a lot of time for you to figure out, like, okay, I do have feelings. You probably actually have very deep feelings. It's just that when you were young, you learned how to dissociate and detach from your own feelings. But over time, they will bubble up back to the surface again, and you will realize who you are, basically. And that's where the cool stuff kind of begins, because it may take time. It may take till you're like 18, 20, maybe even into your 20s. Some people not even until their 30s. But eventually you will gain that kind of self-awareness and that emotional intelligence. And once you do, it's extremely powerful, because then you have this doorway to your own subconscious, which most people don't have. Most people are not aware of their subconscious. That's kind of the whole point. That's what the subconscious is. But for you, once you go on this long journey throughout your early years, and you realize your emotions, you learn about your core personality, your identity, then like I said, you have your own, you're aware of your subconscious. And that's extremely powerful, because it leads to potentially very strong intuition, spiritual, psychic abilities, but also it allows you to understand other people extremely well, because once you have your own understanding of your own subconscious and that own emotional intelligence, it allows you to apply that to other people as well and understand others as well. Okay, so that placement, when I see something like that, it is kind of a heavy burden, but at the same time, there's huge potential. There's a lot of skills and really positive attributes that can come from that. Like I touched on, having Moon in the 12th house, as well as, you do have a whole stellium there. You've got Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune there. I don't usually talk a lot about outer planets in these readings, but we will talk about Saturn. I don't know if we'll talk about Uranus and Neptune. But what was I saying? So, like I touched on, having Moon in the 12th house indicates that you have this potential for psychic abilities. It also just allows you to be more open toward like things that are weird or unusual, or things that are frowned upon by society, like astrology, for example. Many people who are interested in astrology or other like psychic phenomena, like paranormal experiences, many of those people that are interested in these types of things have Moon or other major placements in the 12th house, because it basically makes you open to seeing like the complexity of life. Like, things are not always so simple. Most people prefer to just say, I have this simple understanding of life. That's all I need. I'm not interested in seeing how deep the rabbit hole goes, but for you, you have this kind of openness, maybe even like a curiosity about you. But I got sidetracked again. What I was trying to say is, so Moon in the 12th house indicates this potential for psychic abilities, and as well as just like spiritual, like interest in spiritual things. But what I was going to say is that specifically from your mother's side of the family, we're going to talk more about your like family and upbringing. We're going to talk about that in the next chapter. But I did want to say that is a pattern that I must have read that somewhere, but I've noticed that as well in my own observations, that there's something going on your mother's side of the family where there's some kind of psychic awareness, spiritual experiences, etc. But okay, let's kind of jump around back into your inner planets and kind of seeing what's going on with you on a general level. So I think by now I hope I've explained well enough why you wouldn't relate to Aries. Now that I think about it, your chart really does skew you in a completely different direction from Aries Sun. So it's cool that you are interested in astrology, because I could definitely see you reading about Aries Sun and going like, this isn't me at all. This isn't correct at all. And I'm not surprised though. Like some people relate a lot more to their sun sign than others. It just depends on what's going on in your chart. You have no other fire placements, and then Mercury and Moon in these really heavy Earth signs, but also in these like kind of spiritual, deep houses. When you have major placements like Moon in 12th house, Mercury in 4th house, it's hard to describe, but the 4th and 12th houses, as well as the 8th house for that matter, but these kind of like water houses, they make people feel like very deep and like soulful, like, and they often are a little bit more quiet or reserved. Really nothing like what we'd expect from a fire sign. So that's more of how I would describe you. Earthy, practical, down to earth, maybe a little bit, maybe very introverted or even shy. But at the same time, your placement suggests that you have this kind of inner confidence. Like maybe it's not that you're afraid of other people necessarily. It's just that you know that you're different, and maybe you're just kind of content doing your own thing. I'm not really sure. With Moon in Capricorn, as well as Mercury in Taurus, and even Sun in Aries, all of these placements indicate a lot of independence, and maybe even like a stubborn streak as well. Your placements to me suggest that, on the one hand, you understand the complexity of life, the complexity of yourself. You are multifaceted, and you have this understanding that everything is multifaceted. Everything is way more complex than what most people care to admit, I guess is a way to phrase that. However, on the other hand, these signs that you have these placements in Capricorn, Aries, and Taurus, these are very like black and white, kind of simplistic signs. So basically, like on the one hand, you are complex and multifaceted, but on the other hand, I would speculate that there's some part of you that's like kind of stubborn. You very much know what you want, you know what you don't want. You have this kind of, I think this intuition is definitely a part of it. Like you can kind of just feel out different situations, and you already kind of know where they're going before they happen, very much so. I say this not only because of your Moon in 12th house and Mercury in 4th house, which are kind of spiritual placements, but also Capricorn, Aries, and Taurus. These are all kind of animalistic signs. They're all symbolized by animals. So that shows that you are very instinctual in nature, very intuitive. You do have Aquarius rising. We will talk about that at some point. But generally, your chart is ruled by these like animal signs. So again, like deep feeling, intuiting, kind of feeling out situations. That's what I would speculate would be kind of how you navigate the world. There's another thing that I wanted to talk about. I don't know if you're aware of like detriment placements and domicile placements, or exalted placements versus fall placements. But basically, every planet has certain signs that it does like super well in, and other signs that it kind of struggles in. When we have those harder placements, we may need more time to like work on them, and there are benefits to having detriment placements, but overall they are harder, if that makes sense. You kind of have an interesting mix of both. That's kind of what I wanted to get at. So for example, Moon is in detriment in Capricorn. We kind of talked about that. So Moon represents the emotions. Putting that in detriment in Capricorn, it means that you grew up, we're going to talk more about this in the next chapter, but your upbringing was probably very hard. And so it's difficult for you to just allow yourself to feel emotions. I kind of talked about that a little bit already. And it may be difficult for other people to kind of place you emotionally or to see what you're feeling. So that, that's an example of Moon being in detriment. It's something that you can work on over time if you wish. But it does start out challenging. Like, with really most people or anyone with Moon in Capricorn, you don't get that like nurturing energy that, ideally we'd all like to be nurtured at a young age and, kind of start out life in a more of a soft way when we're vulnerable. And you don't have that luxury with Moon and Capricorn. Moon would typically give you that nurturing energy, but putting it in detriment means that you don't have that at your disposal at a young age. If anything, it's something that you have to kind of create on your own, probably over many years, even many decades. What else was I gonna say? I keep getting off topic, but having detriment placements makes you more misunderstood, generally speaking. So with Moon and Capricorn, your emotions may not always be understood. I guess that's your only main detriment placement. I'm mostly focusing on the inner planets right now, but that is a big one. Moon probably has more to do with our personality than I would say any other sign, really. I would probably go that far. So you do have this major detriment placement, but then you've also got some exalted placements as well. So Sun is exalted in Aries. Venus is also exalted in Pisces. So when you have these exalted placements like Sun in Aries and Venus in Pisces, these are very different placements, but what they have in common is that they show that you have kind of a charisma about you. And I know we talked a lot about how you don't relate to Sun in Aries, but it is there though on some level. You do have that placement. So I'll just talk about that. I'm not sure exactly what you'll relate to, but with Sun and Aries, there's just a charisma there. Most people with Sun and Aries, they just come across very transparent, very direct. They come across kind of innocent and relatable. Many Aries people are like actors for that reason, or performers. So you have that somewhere in you. Yes, it may be kind of clouded over by these other placements that are very different, but it's in there somewhere. And then also Venus in Pisces as well. Venus shows kind of what you're attracted to as well as how you are attractive. It's all about attraction, desire. So it's very beautiful to have Venus exalted. It's beautiful to have any placement exalted, but especially Venus, since Venus is it's a benefic. It's an easy, fun planet. So having Venus so strong in your chart, it just shows that you have kind of like a natural charisma about you. And I want to be careful not to contradict myself because I'm kind of just giving it to you all as I see it. Like I said, you have some placements which show that you might be very reclusive, you may be awkward around people, you may be much more comfortable spending a lot of time alone. But then somewhere in there, you have these other placements which suggest kind of a natural charisma that others may feel very comfortable around you. So, I know I'm contradicting myself, but on some level, these two kind of different themes are true at the same time. What I tend to notice is that when you have multiple inner planets that are exalted as well as in detriment, like you do. Let me put it this way. So if you just had detriment placements, it would make you misunderstood, very humble, kind of a weirdo. You'd be kind of counterculture. You wouldn't relate to the mainstream. If you had all exalted placements, you'd be very popular. You'd be very privileged. Everyone just gets you. Everyone understands you. Everybody likes you. So having kind of a weird mix of both gets really interesting because other people will definitely you draw others' attention is what I'm getting at because of these placements being in these planets are in unique signs. Let's just say, they're either in very strong signs or very challenged signs. So that's going to draw attention to you, and you have some kind of mix of both. You may be very attractive to many people and just come across in a very charismatic way, but at the same time, there's something like aloof about you. There's some kind of misunderstanding there. You seem weird, you seem different. So both are there at the same time, and that can actually be very powerful because I think it's different for every person, but like you may be liked for how different you are. Like especially in modern America, I feel like in the West, we tend to enjoy like anyone who's kind of weird or out there. Like it gets people's attention, and sometimes you can be popular for how unpopular you are, if that makes sense. Or does that make sense? You may be like loved for how not necessarily hated you are, but it's this kind of weird mix of like you're so charismatic, you come across so flawlessly, but at the same time you're misunderstood at the same exact time. So I'm not sure exactly how that works for you, but I wanted to kind of articulate that, because it's an interesting mix to have. You have Jupiter exalted as well. That's pretty powerful. And Venus and Jupiter are actually kind of loosely trining, which is pretty. I don't usually talk a lot about aspects in readings like this, but I did want to mention that because that is. I think a lot of astrologers would envy you for that placement because, like I said, Venus is a benefic, Jupiter is also a benefic. Both of these planets, they make life easy, they make life fun, they make life enjoyable, they bring good fortune and abundance. And not only are they both exalted, they're both in their one sign of exaltation, but they're also trining each other. So they're having this like agreement, this like strong conversation, the strong connection between the two of each other. So basically what that indicates is like, yes, you probably do have this like difficult backstory and you do have a lot of struggles, with people understanding you and things like that. But at the same time, there's a lot of good in your life. There's a lot of abundance. You may be a very lucky person, basically. And specifically, Venus is in your second house. So that shows good fortune, good abundance monetarily, financially. Like you are well supported. Okay. Let me kind of move on here, though. What else can I talk about here? I think I covered most of the basics that I wanted to cover. We haven't talked about Mars or the Ascendant yet, both of which are in Aquarius. With Mars and Aquarius, that indicates that you value the group. Like, it's very important to you to be liked, or at least to be respected by your community, by your peers, by your neighbors, etc. You're kind of like looking around at what other people are doing and on the one hand, yes, you are very independent. I think that's kind of what I mostly see in your chart. But at the same time, there is part of you that values your position in the group, if that makes sense. With Ascendant in Aquarius, that shows that you are a leader and that you're very strong-willed. And when I say leader, I mostly mean like leading by example. Aquarius rising indicates that you don't want to follow other people. You also don't necessarily want to like lead other people. You don't want to control other people. You kind of just want to do your own thing. And I think your other placements back that up as well. Like you are just very self-sufficient, very independent. I think that's kind of admirable. You just want to do your own thing. You take care of your own problems. You aren't one to cause drama. That's another, everything I'm saying sounds so different than Aries, because Aries is usually very dramatic, but with your placements, it really looks to me like you are the opposite of dramatic. Like, I would actually go extremely in the other direction. Like, you could be like in a lot of pain or dealing with some really significant problem, but if you're around other people, you might not say a word. You're just kind of dealing with it on your own, going like, okay, I'll deal with that later, or I'm going to deal with it like silently right now. That's what your placements suggest to me, that you're a very private person, very independent, self-sufficient, and also very practical. Like, I'm gonna work through this. I'm gonna get through this on my own. Gonna do it my own way. So that in itself is a huge strength. It's also gonna be a challenge, though. Other people are not always gonna understand that. And at some point, I think most of us value relationships, friendships, romantic relationships. And what I think is with charts like yours that are so independent, it does make it more difficult to form those deep relationships because, you'd need to learn when can I rely on other people? Like, learning to communicate your problems, communicate your issues. Everyone's human, everyone has issues. I think, we all need to learn kind of when to cooperate, to work on issues together, and when to work on them on our own. Many people, aren't nearly as independent from you. I think most people could probably learn from you in that regard. Okay, that was a lot. Let's go to the next chapter. So this is kind of a heavy chapter and kind of all over the place, but I'm going to talk about your past life experience a little bit, kind of vaguely, just in broad terms about what themes may have transpired in these past lives. And then from there, we're going to talk about major challenges in this life as well as major potential for you. And we'll talk about your upbringing somewhere in there as well. So your North Node is at 13 degrees Aquarius in the first house. South Node is not depicted in this chart, but it's always opposite the North Node. So South Node is at 13 degrees Leo in the 7th house. To me, what that indicates is in a past life, or maybe multiple past lives, you are someone who you felt like you always had to put on a show. You felt like you're always giving your energy to other people. You're always being there for other people. Nothing was about you. Like, you may have been completely detached from your own individuality, which is kind of ironic because in this life, I think you'd be very individualistic or very independent, like I was just saying. But in a past life, your South Node to me indicates that wasn't the case. You were someone who was always like cooperating with other people, being diplomatic. You know, you may have been in like some kind of service position, or maybe you were just very close with your family. Maybe you're some kind of advisor or like counsel. I'm not really sure exactly, but whatever it was, like your whole purpose, your whole being was constantly fixated on other people. How do I serve other people? How do I help? You know, how do I put on a show for them? And that's kind of the interesting thing with South Node and Leo. You were the center of attention, but Leo can be very giving, especially considering this is seventh house Leo for you. So yes, it was all eyes on you, but you know, you may have been like for example, you may have been like an entertainer. So everyone looked at you. Other people may have envied you, but they didn't realize like you were doing it for them. You're constantly serving them, putting on this show for them. Whatever it was, you were in the limelight, but it wasn't really for you. It was all for them. The one thing that you kind of get from those types of roles, though, is that um, you don't. How do I put this? Like, yes, it may have looked like it was completely selfless, and on many levels, it was. You were constantly giving and helping other people, but doing so, I think, allows you to avoid emotional vulnerability. Like, you never have to do anything on your own or put yourself out there as long as you're constantly helping other people. Does that make sense? So, in a weird kind of backward way, part of you may have been doing that. Maybe you were doing that because you had to. I'm not sure what the situation was. But it allowed your soul kind of different luxuries in a kind of weird way, you know? So that's kind of the struggle as well as the potential in this life. I always say you can definitely utilize the strengths from your South Node. You know, you've worked in these kinds of roles multiple times, you know, maybe for hundreds or thousands of years. So when it comes to, you know, maybe this is where your charisma comes from. When it comes to, you know, putting on a show, being the center of attention, or when it comes to like helping other people and being very self-sufficient and constantly giving, you're very like, you've done this a lot. You're very familiar with that type of role. So when it comes to this life, you can definitely do that to some extent. You know, you're comfortable with that. You're good at this type of thing. Do that in this life. But if you were to only do that and just completely repeat your past lives, that would be a waste because you wouldn't be like learning anything. What would be the point of doing it all over again? So that's where the North Node comes into the picture. Um, North Node is in the first house Aquarius, so it's suggesting being more independent, doing things for yourself. And like I said, your other placements suggest that this isn't something that's going to necessarily be difficult for you. You are self-sufficient, but I'm kind of speculating here, but I'd speculate part of it is it has to do with relationships. So like you want those strong relationships and you're excellent when it comes to just kind of giving people what they want or saying whatever is expected of you. But to truly have those deep relationships, you're going to need to be independent, which you are independent, but I mean like bring that individuality to them, if that makes sense. Like be completely transparent, be honest. In a way, it's very simple, but it may be difficult for you because you're not used to this way of being. Like, just communicate with people. What are your needs? What are your desires? You know, don't be afraid to express your individuality. That's what Aquarius is all about, especially first house Aquarius. Don't be afraid to differ from the group. That's actually part of what it takes to truly work with people. Does that make sense? Like, rather than being like a people pleaser and just kind of going along with what everyone wants all the time, don't be afraid to disagree. You know, if you truly want a deep relationship with someone, you're gonna have to disagree with them from time to time, and then you're gonna have to, you know, learn to compromise. That's what it's all about. You can't just constantly give and give and give and agree with everything and just go along with what everyone else says. Doing so will kind of isolate you. You know. So yeah, I wish I could articulate it better than that, but basically don't be afraid to show your humanness basically. And And you probably will be afraid to do that, especially early in life. This is something that you're not really familiar with. It's going to take time, but this is an area of huge potential for you. And ideally, with time, you can kind of balance these two opposing sides. And you can use your charisma, use your helping, your people pleasing skills, maybe, but also express your individuality. Express your be transparent, be honest. That's not really the right word, but be transparent, shoot from the hip. That's people like that, and they'll be able to connect with you on a deeper level when you can express yourself that way. Okay, and what else can we talk about? We can either talk about your upbringing a little bit, or we can go deeper into challenges and potential. This is all really heavy stuff here. Let's talk a little bit more about challenges and potential, since we've already talked a little bit about that. So in this section, I usually start talking about Saturn, and we'll definitely do that. But it is interesting you have Moon conjunct Saturn. That's just another thing indicating that your childhood is probably very difficult, and early in life, emotions are going to be hard for you. It's going to be a lot easier for you to just completely detach from your emotions and say, I don't have feelings. And I could definitely see you being kind of a workaholic as well. I know I'm getting a little off topic here, but it's probably a lot easier for you to just, be working hard, like I said, giving people what they want, saying what they want to hear, and then constantly working hard, working for the future, But where is your immediate feeling? Where is your current feeling? That is going to be less natural, which is kind of ironic because it's simpler. It would seem like it would be easier to just say like, okay, what do I feel right now in this current moment? What do I want to do right now? I want to be lazy. I want to go for a walk. I have no idea. It's going to be difficult for you to connect with yourself on that very basic, simple level. I think that's one of your biggest challenges in life. But I would encourage you to do that. Just sit with yourself. Maybe meditation could be really great for that. Or like I said, like going on a long walk, maybe. Just sit with yourself, be in your own energy. And, you don't always have to like please everyone and work really hard. Do those things, go crazy, but balance it with, what do I feel in the moment? The more you can kind of connect with yourself on that level, the more that you'll find a really deep intuition. I think that would probably be true for anyone, but especially for you with your placements. You're going to find that you have this very deep intuition, this deep kind of intelligence, this deep emotional intelligence. And that's where you can combine that with your other attributes, skills, etc. Like for example, you're probably a very hard worker. That's great, but if you can also have, time to rest, time to take care of yourself, where you can build that intuition, combining that with your great work ethic is beautiful, right? Or for example, like you're very practical, combine that with that emotional like wisdom and intuition, and then you'll have kind of the best of both worlds there. So that in itself is kind of a whole theme. It's kind of a challenge, but also huge area of potential for you. And you've probably already figured a lot of this out, but I'm just going to give it to you anyway, because I'm not sure exactly how far you are like on your journey. Okay, but Saturn in Capricorn. Honestly, I don't have a lot more to say about that. Saturn's in the 12th house, so honestly, I kind of covered it already. It indicates that from a young age, you're not going to want like all this kind of spiritual stuff that comes from your mother's side of the family. You're gonna want to just completely shut it out. Like it's easier just to not deal with it. But over time, these things will come up, and you have great potential there with that. I'm just gonna leave it at that. I think I gave you a lot to kind of chew on when it comes to challenges and potential. Let's talk about your upbringing a little bit though. So you have IC in Taurus, you have South Node in 7th house Leo, like we talked about. So I would speculate with your South Node that from a young age, you may have been a little bit more outgoing than you currently are. Like I know you said you don't relate to Aries, but with South Node and Leo, you would typically have a childhood where you were kind of on display all the time. Like you felt, sometimes that can be difficult. You may have felt kind of like naked or vulnerable because your life was on display all the time for some reason. I'm not sure exactly how or why. Um, but from that, that's kind of where you learn to be charismatic. You learn how to handle attention at a young age. You learn how to look good or say the right thing, etc. That all came to you from your childhood, from some kind of experience. I don't know what it is, but and then I see in Taurus. Honestly, I don't know exactly how to read that. I've read that it indicates that you were materialistically wealthy as a child. That's not always true though, so don't quote me on that. But I see in Taurus would suggest that you had everything you needed materialistically as a child, but you may have not had that like emotional nurturing. And then again, going back to your moon in Capricorn, it definitely suggests like you were not mollycoddled. Like either your parents were straight up like abusive or neglecting, or maybe they were loving parents, but they were very strict. Does that make sense? Either way, there was some situation where you had to take care of yourself basically from a very young age. And this is something that kind of runs through many of your placements as well, that you had to take care of yourself. Like when it comes to your basic needs, you may have been working at a young age, but also from all that, it trains you in not only taking care of yourself materialistically, but also taking care of yourself emotionally. You kind of just deal with your own problems. That's just how you were raised. There's no one there. You know, you didn't have like a shoulder to cry on at a young age. Like if you fell and scraped your knee, no one was there. It's kind of sad, really. But it is beautiful though, the people that it creates, because it makes you so independent, and you know you take care of your own shit, so to speak. So 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 yeah, that's kind of what I see from your childhood. Looks, maybe you did have everything you needed materialistically, but you know, it looks like kind of a rough childhood. You had to take care of yourself basically. Sun and moon are exactly squaring. I just noticed. You're so in other words, you were born right at a third quarter moon. Third quarter moon's also, that's also a placement that indicates you may be very spiritually evolved. You have spiritual potential, psychic abilities, etc. You may be very philosophical. But in terms of your upbringing, having sun and moon squaring like that indicates that your parents may have been very different from one another. Your mother may have dealt, well, not only did she may have had kind of psychic abilities, but she may have also struggled with her mental health. She may have struggled with like depression or maybe like addictions, things like that. And your father, your father, I guess Saturn is also in the 12th house, so that could also indicate your father may have struggled with some of those issues as well. However, sun and moon are squaring, so that indicates that your parents may have been very different from each other. They may have had different parenting styles. What else? Or even if you grew up with one parent, that person may have been like multifaceted. They may have been inconsistent with you. So growing up, you may have not always known what was expected from you. You may have grown up with parents that acted completely different, gave you different narratives, but it basically trained you to hold two conflicting ideas in your head at the same time. And that in itself is very useful because it allows you to be very empathetic. You can empathize with someone who's articulating something you haven't experienced before, or someone who has a different viewpoint than yours. You can still see where they're coming from. But also when it comes to learning advanced concepts, you have the kind of imagination, the mental capacity to be open to these advanced concepts as well. So a lot of that comes from your childhood and how kind of inconsistent it was, if that makes sense. This is getting long, so I'm going to move on. I covered everything I wanted to cover there anyway. But next, let's talk about your career a little bit. So when it comes to your career, we've already established certain kind of strengths and attributes that you have. For one, it looks like you'd have a really strong work ethic. So it looks like you could kind of do a lot of things and be very successful because you work very hard. And then also, I'm not sure exactly what it looks like with you, how you do have this charisma, but then also you may have like very introverted tendencies as well. So I'm not sure how comfortable you would be working with other people. What's interesting though is, midheaven has to do with the career and reputation, and you have midheaven in Scorpio, and it's also conjunct Pluto and pretty close to Lilith as well. Um, so midheaven in Scorpio, this is not always true, but basically what it indicates is that with your career and your reputation as well, you are drawn toward intensity. Like you can handle some kind of intensity, some kind of stressful job, some kind of pressure job, high pressure job. And also you kind of act like a Scorpio basically. You take on scorpionic tendencies in that public role. So something really great would be like an investigator or a first responder. Is that what they're called? Like a medic. I'm forgetting all the words. You being like a detective, police officer, paramedic, firefighter, or you could take it and go into this like investigative role. So you could be more like a do something psychological. Like you could be a what's the word, like a counselor or therapist of some kind, dealing with people when they're in their extremes, and having to take that pressure and like remain logical and use this balance of you'd probably be very skilled when it comes to using a balance of like using your intuition and your empathy, but also remaining detached as well and kind of using logic too. I think that would be really beautiful. That could utilize a lot of your strengths, because I think that's one of the potentially really beautiful things I see about your chart, is that you have this combination of being very practical but also empathetic and intuitive as well. So something where you can utilize all of those. So I would definitely say anything like psychological or anything kind of healthcare related. Those would be really great. What else? Or you may be drawn towards some other kind of pressurized situation as well. But those are the main ones I see. I'm not I'm not trying to predict necessarily. I'm not guessing what you're currently doing. I'm just looking at your strengths and kind of seeing what positions I think would best utilize your strengths that you'd be happiest in. But that's honestly what comes to mind for me. Either something intense, something investigative, maybe healthcare, or something psychological. Something balancing your practicality with your intuition and empathy and emotional intelligence. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to talk about romantically, compatibility wise. What kind of person would you be attracted to? What does the ideal relationship look like for you? For most of this, I look to 3 placements. That would be Venus, Mars, and the descendant. Mars is the least important, so we'll talk about that first. Mars has to do mostly with like sexuality, sexual attraction. With Mars in Aquarius, you may have kind of an unconventional sexuality. There may be something like counterculture going on there. And as well, it goes both ways. You may be attracted to someone who is maybe a little bit androgynous. That just means like someone who's not really masculine or feminine, like a masculine lady or a feminine guy type of thing. Or what else? Mars and Aquarius. Or you also may be attracted to someone who's very unconventional, someone who has their own opinions, someone a bit provocative, etc. More importantly, though, let's look at Venus and the descendant. So Venus has to do, like I said earlier, it has to do with attraction. In this case, it has to do with the kind of person that you'd be attracted to, and also how you express yourself romantically, too. So with Venus in Pisces, you may be attracted to someone who either has Pisces placements or someone who just has like Pisces-like traits. So someone who's very deep, emotional, someone sensitive and intuitive. These are all kind of Pisces keywords. Again, it could literally just be someone with major Pisces placements, or could be someone else like with water placements in general. Someone with Cancer or Scorpio placements will be deep, emotional, sensitive, creative as well. With Venus and Pisces, on some level you're kind of like in love with everyone and everyone's in love with you. Like you almost have no boundaries when it comes to your love and your romance, like and that can be scary. I've talked to people who have Venus and Pisces, and they say it's not all it's cracked up to be. It's not a fun placement, but I think that's just because of what I said. There's no boundaries with your love. I think ideally you'd like someone who is maybe a little bit clingy, because that kind of runs along with these water signs. Having Venus in a water sign, you might really desire that kind of closeness and that sensuality. So that's kind of interesting. In general, you're very independent, but you may actually be attracted to someone who's a little bit, someone who wants that kind of touchy feely, close relationship. You may want that as well. Okay, I think I pretty much covered that. Nick, I may come back to that in a little bit, but most importantly is the descendant, though, and this is often overlooked in astrology. But you have ascendant in Aquarius, so the ascendant, that's the first house cusp. That has everything to do with you and how you approach things. It's your identity. So exactly opposite that is your descendant at 1 degree Leo, and that represents how you work with other people. It represents the kind of person you would best work with in a partnership. So really important for compatibility, probably more so than any other placement. With how do I put this? So with ascendant in Aquarius, like I said earlier, you're kind of someone who leads by example. You're very strong-willed. You're not someone who's going to change yourself for anyone. You want to be your raw, authentic self, and you'd be attracted to someone else who is that way as well. Someone who is independent, very strong-willed, someone who's not going to change for anybody. Someone who's maybe a little bit stubborn. I said earlier, I could see how you might be a little bit stubborn, maybe. So you may be attracted to someone who is like that as well. The difference is with Aquarius rising, it shows that you are someone who you prefer to be kind of a wallflower. You prefer to be the observer. I would speculate that you prefer not to make the first move. What your descendant shows is that you'd be attracted to someone who's kind of like Leo, someone who puts themselves out there, someone fiery, someone passionate, someone who's like Aries, frankly, as well, like what we talked about earlier with Aries. Someone who has major fire placements, particularly Leo, or someone who just resonates with those themes. Someone who makes the first move. They're fiery, adventurous, outgoing, passionate, decisive. That could be a big thing too. You can be a little bit introverted. You might be a lot slower to take action. So you may be actually very attracted to someone who's a little bit more impulsive, someone who puts themselves out there, someone who's more decisive, who kind of takes the reins. And then I could see you kind of naturally going along with that energy and reciprocating that, and being strong-willed in your own way. You're strong-willed in more of like an inner way. You have this inner confidence. Someone else who kind of projects themselves more, I think, would fit with you kind of potentially kind of perfectly. So to put it in astrological terms, definitely could be someone with Leo placements for sure. That would fit pretty well. Or Aries. Like I said, you do have Aries sun, so you would relate on some level to someone who has Aries placements. But really Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, they're all going to be fiery and outgoing. Sagittarius is a little bit different. Sagittarius is mutable fire. It's more intellectual than the other fire signs. So in other words, Sagittarius enjoys analyzing, and so I'm not sure. Honestly, I don't think that fits in with your chart as well. I could be wrong. Of course, it depends on what else is in their chart, when we're talking about people. But I would just think Aries or Leo would fit more. They'd be very consistent, very outgoing. And they're also other kind of fellow animalistic signs. So they would also be kind of intuitive and deep feeling like you would be. So basically, to really boil it down, the signs that I would put at the top of my list for you would be Leo and Pisces. It looks like you're wanting ideally someone who resonates with traits of both signs. These are very different signs, but they do have a few things in common. Ideally, if you could find someone very warm, someone very, what else? Warm, someone very like openly loving, someone who wears their heart on their sleeves. That could be really beautiful for you. That kind of reminds me of Cancer in a way. Cancer may be an interesting sign for you. So maybe Pisces, Leo, or Cancer. Cancer is going to be warm, and they can hold back a little bit, but usually they like initiating because they like connecting with people. Cancer would oppose your moon in Capricorn, but it would be kind of like an opposites attract. They're going to be deep feeling. What else? So yeah, really Pisces, Cancer, or Leo. Or to put it on a more general level, water and fire is kind of what you'd be most attracted to, I think. Next, let's talk about the air signs. So I do notice a lot of couples who ask for readings that have the same ascendant sign. So you may be attracted to someone else who has Aquarius rising. That can often work because when you have the same ascendant sign, it basically means you're approaching everything the same general type of way. So it basically means you're on the same page all the time. Even if you have different other placements and you have other personality traits that are different, you at least approach things the same. You're on the same page basically. So Aquarius rising could be very interesting. Other than that, though, you don't have a lot of other air planets. You do have Mars and Aquarius, but so Aquarius in particular is a sign that you're going to relate to on some level. They'll be kind of strong-willed in a detached way, which you may relate to a lot. And with Mars and Aquarius, you may have a kind of chemistry there. You may be very attracted to them. There could be kind of good sexuality there. But Libra and Gemini are a little bit different because they're a little bit more complex and indecisive, kind of fickle. So I don't think that's what you're really looking for. You're looking for someone warm and kind of openly sensitive, and someone strong-willed as well. And Libra and Gemini really aren't any of those things. They're more detached and they're more kind of constantly changing and adapting. I just don't think, I think it'd be like putting two negative magnets together. I don't think that would work with you. You could maybe have some interesting conversations with them, but I don't think it would develop into a romantic situation unless they have, the rest of their astrology is a certain way. But in general, I really don't see you working well with Libra or Gemini. So air signs in general, no. Aquarius might be interesting. You also have your North Node in Aquarius, so Aquarius might help you to evolve in some kind of way, which may help or hinder a relationship. Sometimes that can be exciting, but it can also be a lot of work. So Aquarius could be interesting. Libra and Gemini, not so much. Air signs in general are very detached and intellectual, so like, I don't know. I'm just not sure if your chart doesn't show to me that you're seeking that romantically, really, in a long-term capacity. Okay, and then lastly would be the earth signs. So, like I said in the very beginning of this video, I think you relate more to the earth element than you do any other element. You are very earthy. You are practical. You're down to earth. You are humble. You're hardworking, etc. These are earth keywords. So someone else who has a lot of earth placements, you're going to relate to very well, and it's going to make a relationship very easy to maintain. The only downside is that it might not be very exciting. Your chart really doesn't show to me that you are drawn to that. Yes, you relate a lot to earth signs, but if you only relate a lot to someone else, my philosophy is that it's going to be easier to maintain the relationship, but it's also going to be less exciting, less dynamic. There's no edginess, there's no mystery there. It's just very familiar, very comfortable. So unless they have some other like fire or water placements, someone who just has a lot of earth placements, I think would be very good friends with you. It's kind of like friend zone material for you. You're gonna have a lot in common, maybe too much in common. Great friends. That's not as great romantically though, I think. And the only difference I would really say within the earth signs is you're going to relate a lot to Capricorn or Taurus. These signs have a lot in common, and those are where your major placements are. They're very stable, very consistent, very, very kind of black and white as well, very easy to understand. Capricorn can be a little bit private, but again, they're very straightforward though at the same time. Virgo is a little bit different because Virgo is the one earth sign that's intellectuals. They're constantly analyzing everything like I am right now. I'm a Virgo. So that could be a little bit different. I think your chart to me suggests that you'd be a little bit less interested in Virgo than the other earth signs, whether it be like friend-wise or romantically. Because like I said, your chart just isn't... I mean, it can be draining for many people to be constantly analyzing everything the way Virgo does, if that makes sense. So in short, Taurus and Capricorn look like great friends. Mostly the water and fire signs, though, is what I see romantically, though, for you. Especially Pisces, Leo, or Cancer. Okay, so that's pretty much what I see for this reading. I did want to add one thing that I forgot to mention with Pluto conjunct the midheaven. With Pluto conjunct the midheaven in Scorpio, you have a very interesting reputation. You have an interesting persona, an interesting aura that you give off. you probably give off this like very powerful, mysterious aura when you're in public or when you're at work or school or whatever you do. Others sense you, and they sense you as being very powerful, and this, you can be very polarizing basically. You may also be very ambitious. Like I said, you're probably very hardworking, and so you may kind of quickly build up some kind of intense success and some kind of I don't want to say fame necessarily, but maybe a prominent reputation that would go along with that. But there's a darkness there. The hard part is that because Pluto is there, the more success that you'll find with your career and reputation, the more paranoid it will make you. It's like this darkness kind of creeps in. I think part of it is that you don't want to feel too exposed. Like I said, it does look like you're more of an introvert. So you may find a lot of success with your career, but in a way it may almost make you feel more vulnerable, more paranoid. So the answer, I guess, is just about balance. Just know that you may be polarizing it. It's not even anything that you're necessarily doing. It's just kind of an aura that you give off. Use it to your advantage. I think you have many placements that suggest that you are provocative. Other people notice you for whatever reason. Even if you're just trying to do your own thing and not bother anybody, just doing your own thing, minding your own business, other people are going to notice you, and they will have their own reactions to you. They'll either be in love with you or they'll hate you, whatever they want to do. So maybe just, I don't know, use that. That's actually very powerful. That could be very valuable. So use that to your advantage. You can have fun with it, I think. Okay, but that's what I see for your reading. So definitely let me know if you have any questions or feedback at all. But I hope this was interesting or helpful for you. Thanks for this reading request, and have a great day.